The rifle felt wrong in her hands. Corporal Alara Vance knew it the moment her fingers touched the stock, knew someone had been here before her, knew this was not the weapon she had zeroed yesterday. She said nothing. At Marine Corps Base Quantico, in the hills of Virginia, where Scout Sniper School broke more candidates than it graduated, showing weakness was the same as quitting. And Alara Vance had not driven 2,000 miles from Wyoming to quit on day one. Before we go any further, drop a comment and let us know what state you're watching from. Maybe you know someone who has faced impossible odds like the woman in this story. The other candidates were already prone on the firing line. 12 men spread across the known distance range like stones in a field. She was the 13th, the only woman to attempt this course in 3 years, and the whispers had started before she even stepped off the bus. Now Gunnery Sergeant Wade Crenshaw stood behind her, his shadow falling across her shooting mat like a stain. You planning on joining us today, Corporal? Or you need a personal invitation? His voice carried across the range. A few of the other candidates glanced back. One of them, a thick-necked lance corporal from Texas named Derek Odom, actually laughed. Alara settled into position without responding. She knew what they saw when they looked at her. 5'6", 130 pounds. Gray eyes that some people found unsettling because she had a habit of not blinking when she focused. What they did not see was the 17 years she had spent shooting in the wind that came screaming down from the Absaroka Range, learning to read air currents the way most people read street signs. They did not see her grandfather putting a rifle in her hands when she was 6 years old and telling her that stillness was not the absence of movement, but the presence of control. They did not see the grave back in Cody, Wyoming, where her little brother Marcus had been buried for 8 years now. The brother she was supposed to be watching that morning in the high country. The brother whose memory drove her to prove that she belonged in places where people said she did not. The target sat at 500 meters. A black silhouette against tan backing, standard qualification distance. She pressed her cheek to the stock and felt the subtle wrongness again. Someone had adjusted her scope. A quarter minute of angle, maybe half. Enough to make her miss. Enough to make her look incompetent on her very first official shot. Alara did not adjust the scope back. Instead, she did the math in her head, calculated the compensation, and felt her heartbeat slow the way it always did when the world narrowed down to her breath and the target and the space between them. Her grandfather had called it the quiet place. The still point where nothing existed except the next exhale and the gentle squeeze of the trigger. She fired. The round punched through the target dead center. She worked the bolt and fired again. Center. Again. Center. 5 shots in a pattern so tight it looked like a single hole from the instructor's position. Gunnery Sergeant Crenshaw said nothing for a long moment. She could feel him behind her, feel the silence spreading across the range as the other candidates realized what they had just witnessed. Then he leaned down, close enough that she could smell the tobacco on his breath. "Luck," he said quietly. "Enjoy it while it lasts. Corporal, this course has a way of revealing what people really are, and what you are is a publicity stunt in a uniform." He straightened and walked down the line, already barking corrections at another shooter. Alara stayed in position, controlling her breathing, refusing to let the anger show on her face. She had known men like Crenshaw her whole life. Men who saw her and decided what she was before she ever opened her mouth. Men who confused their assumptions with reality. But she had also known her grandfather, a man who had taught her that the best response to doubt was not argument but excellence. That words meant nothing and results meant everything. That when someone bet against you, the only move that mattered was making them watch while you proved them wrong. On the far end of the firing line, the youngest candidate in the course was struggling. Private First Class Tommy Ewan, 19 years old, and so nervous his hand was shaking. His shots were scattered across the target like buckshot, and Crenshaw was making his way toward the kid with the look of a predator who had spotted wounded prey. Alara watched for a moment, then did something that would define the next 3 weeks of her life. She got up and walked toward Tommy Ewan. Gunnery Sergeant Crenshaw stopped mid-stride, his eyes narrowing as he watched her kneel beside the struggling private. And in that moment, without knowing it, Alara Vance made her first enemy at Scout Sniper School. An enemy with the power to end her career. An enemy who had just decided to do exactly that. Tommy Ewan flinched when she knelt beside him, as if expecting a blow. Up close, she could see the sweat beading on his forehead, the way his jaw was clenched so tight the muscles jumped beneath his skin. He was terrified, and terror made shooters miss. "Your breathing is wrong," Alara said quietly, pitching her voice beneath the crack of rifle fire around them. "You're holding your breath and then exhaling all at once. The shot needs to break during the natural pause." "I know how to breathe," he whispered back, but there was no conviction in it. She studied his position for a moment. His elbows were wrong too, creating tension in his shoulders that would translate to movement in the barrel. But those were mechanical fixes. The real problem was between his ears. "Where are you from?" she asked. He blinked at the unexpected question. "San Jose, California." "You ever watch the fog roll in over the bay? What does that have to do with anything?" "The fog does not rush," Alara said. "It just arrives. That is how your breathing should feel. That is how the trigger pull should feel. Not forced, not held, just arriving." Something shifted in his eyes. She watched him settle back into position, watched his shoulders drop a fraction of an inch, watched him stop fighting himself. His next shot hit the target. Not center, but on paper. His fifth shot was 2 inches from the bullseye. "Private Ewan, gunnery," Sergeant Crenshaw's voice cut across the range like a blade. "Did I authorize personal instruction from Corporal Vance?" Tommy's newfound calm shattered. "No, Gunny Sergeant." "Then why is she hovering over you like a mother hen?" Crenshaw stopped directly behind Alara, close enough that she could feel the heat of his presence. "Get back to your lane, Corporal. Now." Alara rose smoothly and walked back to her position without looking at him. She could feel the eyes of every candidate on the range tracking her movement. Some curious, some hostile. One pair, belonging to Lance Corporal Derek Odom, openly contemptuous. The rest of the morning passed in a haze of gunfire and shouted corrections. Crenshaw found reasons to single her out 6 more times. Her position was wrong. Her rate of fire was too slow. Her target marking was imprecise. Each criticism was delivered loud enough for everyone to hear, and each one was completely fabricated. She said nothing. She simply shot, and shot well, and let her target speak for her. By the time they broke for chow, her shoulders ached from tension she had not allowed herself to show. The dining facility was a low cinder block building that smelled of industrial cleaning solution and overcooked vegetables. Alara grabbed a tray and found a table in the corner, expecting to eat alone. Tommy Ewan sat down across from her without asking permission. "The thing you said about the fog," he started, then stopped, struggling with the words. "It helped. I do not know why, but it helped." "Good." He picked at his food for a moment. "Why did you do it? Help me, I mean. You had to know Crenshaw would come down on you." Alara considered the question. The honest answer was complicated, tangled up with memories of Marcus and the weight of being the older sibling who was supposed to protect and teach. But she did not know Tommy Ewan well enough for honest answers. "Because you needed help," she said instead. "And because someone helped me once when I was struggling." He nodded slowly. "The other guys are saying you should not be here. That you are only in the course because of politics. Diversity quotas. I know what they are saying. Is it true?" She met his eyes. "I qualified for this course the same way every one of them did. Top scores at the battalion level. Recommendation from my commanding officer. Physical fitness test in the top 5%. The only difference between me and them is that they got handshakes when their orders came through, and I got lawyers from headquarters making sure every piece of paperwork was bulletproof in case someone tried to challenge my spot." Tommy absorbed this. "That must make you angry." "It makes me focused," Alara corrected. "Anger is a luxury I cannot afford right now." They finished their meal in comfortable silence. When they rose to bust their trays, Alara noticed Staff Sergeant Miguel Rojas watching her from across the dining facility. Unlike Crenshaw's hostile surveillance, there was something different in Rojas's gaze. Something that looked almost like recognition, though she was certain they had never met. The afternoon brought classroom instruction on ballistics and wind reading. Alara sat in the back row and took notes in a small green notebook, the same kind her grandfather had used to record his observations from decades of hunting. Crenshaw was not the primary instructor for this block, which meant she could breathe for a few hours. After evening chow, she returned to the female quarters in Building 1142. The room was Spartan, a single rack, a wall locker, a desk with a lamp. She was the only woman in the course, which meant she was the only occupant of a space designed for 8. The silence should have been peaceful. Instead, it felt like isolation. She was field stripping her rifle for the 3rd time that day, checking every component with methodical precision when she found it. A small mark on the elevation turret of her scope. A scratch that had not been there when she locked the weapon in the armory the night before. Someone had accessed her rifle. Someone had deliberately sabotaged her Zero. And the only people with keys to the armory were the instructor cadre. Alara sat very still for a long moment, the scope in her hands, the implications settling over her like cold water. This was not just hostility. This was not just a gunnery sergeant who did not want women in his course. This was coordinated action designed to make her fail, to make her wash out with a record of poor performance that would follow her for the rest of her career. She thought about reporting it, thought about the chain of command, the proper channels, the regulations that were supposed to protect her. Then she thought about what would actually happen. Her word against an instructor with 12 years of service. A female candidate accusing the cadre of sabotage. The investigation that would go nowhere. The reputation she would earn as a troublemaker, a complainer, someone who blamed others for her own failures. No, there would be no report. There would be no complaint. There would only be excellence so undeniable that no amount of sabotage could hide it. Alara reassembled her rifle, adjusted her scope back to true zero, and began planning for war. Day 4 began in darkness. 0430. The candidates assembled outside the barracks in PT gear while the Virginia humidity wrapped around them like a wet blanket. Alara had slept 3 hours, spending the rest of the night going over her equipment with obsessive attention. She had found 2 more anomalies. A slightly loosened scope mount. A trigger spring that felt marginally different than it should. Small things. Deniable things. The kind of sabotage that could be explained away as normal wear or user error. She had fixed everything and told no one. The physical training was brutal by design, meant to break down bodies and identify weakness. 4-mile run through wooded trails. Hundreds of push-ups and flutter kicks in the dewy grass. Buddy carries up a hill that seemed to grow steeper with each repetition. Alara kept pace with the middle of the pack, never first, never last, drawing as little attention as possible. But Crenshaw found her anyway. Corporal Vance, you were dogging it. Pick up the pace or pick up your bags. She was already running at 7-minute mile pace, faster than half the men around her. She said nothing and accelerated, feeling the burn spread through her legs, welcoming it. Pain was familiar. Pain was manageable. Pain was so much simpler than politics. After PT came the land navigation test. 8 hours in the woods with a map, a compass, and a series of coordinates that had to be reached in sequence. This was where scout sniper candidates learned to move through terrain unseen, to read the land the way they would later read a battlefield. Alara had grown up navigating the backcountry of Wyoming, where getting lost meant dying, and she moved through the Virginia forest with quiet confidence. She found her first 3 points ahead of schedule. The 4th was in a creek bed, tucked beneath an overhang of roots and mud. She was reaching for the marker when she heard voices approaching. Crenshaw wants her gone by the end of the week, someone was saying. The voice belonged to one of the assistant instructors, a sergeant whose name she had not bothered to learn. Another voice responded, deeper and more cautious. That is a dangerous game. If anyone finds out we have been tampering with her gear, careers are going to end. No one is going to find out. She will wash out on performance, plain and simple. A few bad scores, a failed evaluation, and she is back to the fleet with a note in her file that says she could not cut it. Everyone wins. Except her. She is a symbol, the first voice said dismissively. Command wants to prove women can be snipers, so they pushed her through screening. She does not actually belong here. We are just correcting an error. The footsteps moved past her position. Alara remained frozen in the creek bed, mud soaking through her uniform, her heart pounding against her ribs. She had suspected. Now she knew. This was not one instructor with a grudge. This was a conspiracy. She collected the marker and continued the course, but her mind was elsewhere, running through options and outcomes. Reporting was still off the table. Even with what she had overheard, it would be her word against multiple instructors. The investigation would take months, and in the meantime, she would be removed from the course for her own protection, they would say, and her chance would be gone forever. The only path forward was the one she had already chosen. Be so good they could not deny her. Score so high that sabotage became irrelevant. Win so decisively that the whole rotten system would have to acknowledge her. She finished the land navigation course in 3rd place overall. When the scores were posted outside the classroom building, she allowed herself a small moment of satisfaction. Derek Odom had come in 7th. Crenshaw's expression when he read the results looked like he had swallowed something sour. That evening, the candidates gathered for a classroom session on range estimation. Staff Sergeant Rojas was teaching, and Alara found herself paying attention not just to the material, but to the man himself. There was something in the way he looked at her, brief glances that held weight she did not understand. Halfway through the lecture, Rojas posed a problem to the class. A target at unknown distance, mirage present, limited reference points. How do you estimate range accurately enough for a first-round hit? The candidates offered various answers. Use the milled dots in the scope. Bracket with ranging shots. Reference known object sizes. Corporal Vance, Rojas said, his voice cutting through the discussion. What would you do? Alara considered the scenario. Read the mirage layers, she said. In those conditions, the thermal distortion will show banding at specific distances. Match the pattern to your dope book, and you can estimate within 25 meters. Rojas nodded slowly. That is exactly right. He paused, something flickering across his face. Your father taught you that, did he not? The room went silent. Alara felt the blood drain from her face. I do not know what you mean, Staff Sergeant. David Vance. Rojas continued quietly. 2nd Battalion, 3rd Marines. Best spotter I ever worked with. He used to talk about his daughter. So she could read wind before she could read books. The other candidates were staring now. Alara's throat felt tight. My father passed away 6 years ago. I know. Rojas held her gaze for a long moment. He would be proud of what you're doing here, Corporal. Remember that. He turned back to his lecture, but the words hung in the air like gun smoke. Alara sat rigid in her seat, fighting to keep her composure. She had not expected her father's ghost to find her here, had not expected anyone to remember him, had not expected kindness from any instructor in this place. But even as the warmth of that recognition settled into her chest, she knew it changed nothing. Crenshaw would not care whose daughter she was. The conspiracy against her would not dissolve because of legacy. The end of week evaluation was in 2 days. Marksmanship, fieldcraft, and physical performance combined into a single score that would determine who advanced and who went home. And she had just learned that multiple instructors were working together to ensure she failed. The morning of day 5 brought the stalking exercise, and with it, the first real test of whether Alara could survive what was coming. The scenario was simple in concept and brutal in execution. Each candidate had to approach a target area across 800 meters of open terrain without being detected by instructors using high-powered optics. Get spotted 3 times and you failed. Get within 200 meters undetected and you passed. Alara had drawn the worst lane. Open grassland with minimal cover. The morning sun at an angle that would catch any reflected light, and gunnery Sergeant Crenshaw himself manning the observation post. She spent 20 minutes studying the terrain before she moved. The grass was knee-high in some places, flattened in others. There was a slight depression running diagonally across the field, barely visible, the kind of feature most people would overlook. Her grandfather had taught her to see these things. The land always offers a path, he used to say. You just have to be patient enough to find it. She began her stalk. Movement in the grass was about rhythm. too fast, and the pattern of motion stood out against the natural sway of the vegetation. Too slow, and you became a stationary anomaly, a shape that did not belong. Alara matched her crawl to the wind, moving when the gusts bent the grass around her, freezing when the air went still. An hour passed, then two. The sun climbed higher and sweat soaked through her ghillie suit, but she did not increase her pace. Crenshaw was up there with his spotting scope, waiting for her to make a mistake. She would not give him one. At the 3-hour mark, she reached the 200-meter line. She had not been spotted once. When the exercise ended and the candidates assembled for debrief, Crenshaw's face was a mask of controlled fury. He read through the results without looking at her. 7 candidates had passed. Alara's time was the second fastest of the group. Lance Corporal Odom, Crenshaw called out. You were spotted 4 times. Explain yourself. Derek Odom stood at rigid attention, his jaw tight. No excuse, Gani Sergeant. No excuse is right. You moved like a drunk elephant through that field. One more performance like that, and you were gone. The Texan said nothing, but Alara could see the shame burning in his face. For all his hostility toward her, Derek Odom was a proud man, and public humiliation cut deep. That afternoon was dedicated to wind reading on the 1,000-meter range. The flags were barely moving, but Alara could feel the cross-current in the air, a subtle push from the southeast that the fabric was too heavy to register. She made her adjustments and put 5 rounds into a group the size of her fist. Derek was struggling. His shots were drifting left, and with each miss his frustration grew more visible. He was overcompensating now, chasing his errors instead of diagnosing them. Alara watched him for a long moment, remembering the contempt in his laugh that first day on the range, remembering the things he had said about her in the barracks when he thought she could not hear. Every instinct told her to let him fail, let him wash out and remove one more hostile presence from her daily life. But that was not who she was. That was not who her father had raised her to be. During the break, she approached his position. Derek saw her coming, and his expression hardened. I do not need your help, he said before she could speak. You are reading the mirage wrong, Alara replied calmly. The heat shimmer is showing a full value wind from your 9 o'clock, but there is a cross-current at about 400 meters that reverses the drift. You need to hold right at target, not left. Derek stared at her. Why would you tell me that? Because we were supposed to be on the same side. Because scout snipers work in teams. And if you cannot trust your team, you die. She paused. And because being good at this does not mean anything if I have to tear down everyone around me to prove it. She walked away before he could respond. When the shooting resumed, she did not watch his lane. But she heard the spotter calling his impacts, and by the end of the session, Derek Odom was hitting center mass. That evening, Tommy found her behind the barracks, sitting on an ammunition crate and watching the sun go down over the Virginia hills. Odom told me what you did, Tommy said, settling onto a crate beside her. He is not going to say thank you, but I think you might have saved his slot in the course. I did not do it for thanks. I know. That is why it matters. They sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned orange and purple. For a moment, Alara let herself feel something other than vigilance. Let herself remember that there were still decent people in the world, even in places designed to break them down. The moment shattered when Staff Sergeant Rojas appeared around the corner of the building. His face was grave. Corporal Vance, you need to come with me. What is happening? Rojas hesitated, and in that hesitation, she saw something that made her stomach drop. Gunnery Sergeant Crenshaw has filed a formal complaint. He is claiming you provided unauthorized assistance to another candidate during a graded evaluation. He is recommending immediate removal from the course. Alara stood slowly, her hands steady even as her world tilted, helping Derek, teaching him to read the wind. The very act of decency that defined who she was had just become the weapon Crenshaw would use to destroy her. The hearing is tomorrow morning, Rojas continued. 0700, Commanding Officers Conference Room. Crenshaw is pushing for expedited processing. He wants it gone before the end of week evaluation. Alara looked at Tommy, saw the horror dawning on his face, and felt something cold settle into her chest. She had prepared for sabotage. She had prepared for hostility. She had not prepared for her own integrity to be turned against her. And now she had 12 hours to find a way to survive. The conference room smelled of stale coffee and old decisions. Alara stood at attention before a long table where 3 officers sat in judgment. Captain Diane Westbrook occupied the center chair, her silver oak leaves catching the fluorescent light. To her left sat a major from the training command, whose name Alara had not caught. To her right, a lieutenant colonel who had not spoken since the proceedings began. Gunnery Sergeant Crenshaw stood at a podium to her left, a folder of documents open before him. The accused candidate did willfully and knowingly provide tactical instruction to another candidate during a graded evaluation, Crenshaw was saying. This constitutes academic dishonesty under Training Command Regulation 4-7, subsection C. The recommended action is immediate dismissal from the course with prejudicial notation in her service record. Captain Westbrook studied the papers before her. And you witnessed this instruction personally, Gunnery Sergeant? I observed Corporal Vance approach Lance Corporal Odom's firing position during a break in the wind reading evaluation. She remained there for approximately 90 seconds before returning to her own lane. Did you hear what was said? Crenshaw's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The distance precluded audio observation, ma'am. However, Lance Corporal Odom's performance improved markedly in the subsequent firing iteration. The inference is clear. Inference, Captain Westbrook repeated. Not direct evidence. The pattern of behavior speaks for itself. Corporal Vance has repeatedly demonstrated a disregard for proper protocol. She has approached other candidates during training exercises, she has questioned instructor guidance, and she has shown a persistent inability to respect the chain of command. Alara felt the words land like blows, each accusation twisting something true into something unrecognizable. She had helped Tommy. She had helped Derek. She had done what any decent Marine would do for a struggling teammate. And now those acts of integrity were being cataloged as evidence of her unworthiness. Corporal Vance, Captain Westbrook said, "Do you wish to respond?" Alara took a breath. "Permission to speak freely, ma'am." "Granted. I did speak with Lance Corporal Odom during the break. I offered him advice on reading wind conditions. I did so because he was struggling and because I believed helping a fellow candidate was consistent with the values this course is supposed to instill. At no point did I provide him answers to a graded problem. I shared a technique that any qualified instructor could have offered. If that constitutes academic dishonesty, then I am guilty. But I would respectfully submit that it constitutes something else entirely. And what would that be? Being a good Marine." The room went silent. Captain Westbrook's expression revealed nothing. The major was writing something in his notes. The lieutenant colonel still had not moved. "This board will recess to deliberate," Captain Westbrook announced. "Corporal Vance, you will wait outside until called." Alara executed a precise about-face and marched from the room. The hallway beyond was empty except for Staff Sergeant Rojas, who leaned against the wall with his arms crossed. "You did well in there," he said quietly. "Did I? It does not feel like it." Rojas was silent for a moment. "Your father would have said the same thing, you know. Word for word. He never could understand why helping people was considered a weakness." Alara leaned against the opposite wall, suddenly exhausted. "Did you know? When I arrived, did you know who I was? I suspected. You have his eyes. And that thing you do, where you go completely still before you shoot. He used to do the same thing. He used to drive the other spotters crazy because they could never tell when he was about to send it." The door opened, and a lance corporal she did not recognize gestured for her to return. Alara straightened her uniform and walked back into the conference room. Captain Westbrook's face was unreadable. "Corporal Vance, this board has reached a decision. The charge of academic dishonesty is dismissed due to insufficient direct evidence." Relief flooded through her so suddenly she nearly swayed. "However," Captain Westbrook continued, and the word hung in the air like a guillotine blade, Your conduct during training has raised legitimate concerns about your judgment and your ability to follow established protocols. Effective immediately, you're placed on formal probation for the remainder of the course. Any further incidents, regardless of how minor, will result in automatic dismissal. Additionally, your end-of-week evaluation scores will be subject to enhanced scrutiny by multiple instructors to ensure objectivity. Alara understood what that meant. Every score would be reviewed by Crenshaw and his allies. Every performance would be judged by people who wanted her gone. The bar had just been raised to impossible heights. Gunnery Sergeant Crenshaw, Captain Westbrook said, "You are reminded that all candidates deserve fair and impartial evaluation. I trust that will not be an issue." "Of course not, ma'am," Crenshaw replied, and Alara could hear the satisfaction beneath his professional tone. He had not gotten her expelled, but he had gotten something almost as good. A leash, a way to control every aspect of her remaining time in the course. "The board is dismissed." Alara saluted and departed. In the hallway, Rojas was gone. She walked alone through the building, past classrooms where other courses were in session, past offices where careers were made and broken, until she found herself outside in the gray morning light. The end-of-week evaluation was in 36 hours. She was on probation. Her scores would be reviewed by her enemies. And she had just been told, in the politest possible terms, that she would be held to a standard no other candidate had to meet. She thought about her father, about the values he had taught her, about the belief that doing the right thing would eventually be recognized and rewarded. Standing alone outside the headquarters building, Alara Vance realized that belief might have been the most dangerous thing he ever gave her, and she had no idea if she could survive its consequences. Alara did not sleep that night. She lay in her rack, staring at the ceiling, running scenarios through her mind like ammunition through a chamber. Every path she could see led to the same destination. Crenshaw controlled the evaluation. Crenshaw controlled the scores. Crenshaw had already demonstrated he would bend any rule to see her fail. At 0300, she gave up on rest and went for a run. The base was quiet in the hours before dawn, just the distant hum of generators and the occasional vehicle moving between buildings. She ran until her lungs burned and her legs ached, until the physical pain drowned out the noise in her head. When she returned to the barracks, Captain Diane Westbrook was waiting outside her door. Alara stopped short, suddenly conscious of her sweat-soaked PT gear and the surprise that must be showing on her face. "Mum, walk with me, Corporal." It was not a request. Alara fell into step beside the captain, and they moved in silence past the armory and the classroom building until they reached a small memorial garden she had never noticed before. A bronze plaque listed names under the heading Fallen Scout Snipers. Westbrook stopped before it. "I need to tell you something," the captain said. "Something that is not in any official file. Something that could end my career if certain people learned I had shared it." Alara said nothing, waiting. 6 years ago, Gunnery Sergeant Crenshaw was deployed to Helmand Province with a sniper team. His spotter was a woman named Sergeant Catherine Reyes. She was one of the first female Marines to serve in a direct combat role after the restrictions were lifted. The name meant nothing to Alara, but she could feel the weight of it in Westbrook's voice. Crenshaw and Reyes were on overwatch for a patrol when they were compromised. Enemy fighters flanked their position. By all accounts, it should have been a fatal situation. 2 snipers against 8 insurgents at close range. What happened? Reyes happened. She engaged the enemy while Crenshaw was repositioning. She killed 4 of them before taking a round through the shoulder. She kept fighting with one arm, drew fire away from Crenshaw's position, and gave him the window he needed to eliminate the remaining threats. She saved his life. Alara processed this. That sounds like a valor commendation. It should have been. But Crenshaw filed a different report. He claimed Reyes froze under fire. Claimed he had to save her, not the other way around. Said her presence on the team was a liability that nearly got them both killed. Why would he lie? Westbrook turned to face her. Because he could not accept what really happened. Could not accept that a woman had saved him. Could not reconcile his beliefs about female Marines with the reality that one of them had performed better under fire than he did. So he rewrote history, made himself the hero, made her the cautionary tale about why women do not belong in combat. The anger came slowly at first, then all at once. Alara felt it rising through her chest like a tide. What happened to Sergeant Reyes? She was medically retired due to her injuries. The official narrative followed Crenshaw's version. She tried to dispute it, but her word against a decorated gunnery sergeant with 12 years of service. The investigation went nowhere. Alara recognized those words. She had thought them herself just days ago. She lives in North Carolina now, Westbrook continued. I have spoken with her. She knows about you. She knows what Crenshaw is doing to you. And she wanted me to give you a message. What message? Do not let him win again. Do not let him do to you what he did to her. Whatever it takes, whatever you have to endure, show them all what a woman can do when she refuses to be erased. The sun was beginning to rise over the Virginia hills, painting the memorial garden in shades of gold and amber. Alara stared at the bronze plaque, at the names of Marines who had given everything, and felt something shift inside her. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Why risk your career? Because I was Catherine Reyes's commanding officer. I was the one who had to tell her that her complaint was being dismissed. I was the one who watched a hero be turned into a footnote because the system was not ready to hear the truth. Westbrook's voice was steady, but her eyes held old pain. I have carried that failure for 6 years. I will not carry another. What am I supposed to do with this information? That is up to you. You cannot use it against Crenshaw directly. There is no evidence that would hold up, but you can know the truth. You can know what kind of man you are facing, and you can decide whether you're going to let him write your story the way he wrote hers. Alara thought about probation, about enhanced scrutiny, about a system designed to ensure she failed. Then she thought about Catherine Reyes, fighting with one arm, saving a man who would repay her with lies. The end of week evaluation is tomorrow, Alara said. I know. They're going to fail me no matter what I do. Probably. Westbrook paused. Unless you do something so undeniable that even they cannot pretend it did not happen. Like what? There is a record, the captain said slowly. A base record for long-distance shooting. It has stood for 37 years. No candidate has ever broken it during training. Alara felt something stir in her chest. Hope, maybe. Or something fiercer. The qualification shoot tomorrow includes an optional distance challenge. Westbrook continued. Any candidate can attempt it after completing the standard course. No one ever does because failure counts against your overall score. But success at extreme range would be documented, witnessed, undeniable, and Crenshaw would have to acknowledge it. Everyone would have to acknowledge it. The sun broke fully over the horizon, flooding the memorial garden with light. Alara looked at the names on the bronze plaque one more time, then turned to face Captain Westbrook. What is the current record? 987 meters. Set by Master Sergeant Frank Dillon in 1987. Alara nodded slowly. And what range would I need to hit to break it? Whatever you can reach, Corporal. Westbrook met her eyes. Whatever you can reach. The mail clerk found her after morning chow. A letter from home, he said, handing over an envelope with her mother's careful handwriting on the front. Alara tucked it into her cargo pocket and did not open it until she was alone in her quarters that evening. The evaluation was in 12 hours. She had spent the day in final preparation, checking her equipment, reviewing her range cards, visualizing every stage of the qualification course. But her mind kept returning to the choice that waited at the end of it. Attempt the record and risk everything, or play it safe and hope the conspiracy against her somehow failed. She sat on the edge of her rack and opened the letter. Dear Alara, her mother had written, I know you asked me not to send anything while you are at training. You said you needed to focus, and I have tried to respect that. But today would have been Marcus's 24th birthday, and I could not let it pass without writing to you. Alara felt her throat tighten. She had known the date was approaching, had pushed it to the back of her mind where it could not distract her. But here it was, summoned back by her mother's words. I found something in the attic last week. A letter Marcus wrote when he was 12. His teacher had assigned them to write about someone they admired. He chose you. The handwriting changed. Smaller, Messier, a child's uncertain script preserved across the years. My sister Alara is the person I admire most. She can shoot better than anyone in our whole county, even the grown-ups. She taught me how to track deer and how to read the wind. Some kids at school say girls cannot do things like that, but Alara proves them wrong every day. When I grow up, I want to be brave like her. I want to make her proud. Alara set the letter down. Her hands were trembling. 8 years ago, she had been 16 and Marcus had been 12. Their father had been dead for 2 years, and she had taken over teaching her brother the things David Vance never got to finish. Shooting, hunting, how to move through the backcountry without leaving a trace. That morning in October, they had hiked into the high country before dawn, chasing elk that had been spotted near the ridgeline. Marcus had been so excited. This was his first real hunt, his first chance to prove he was ready. She was supposed to be watching him, but she had gotten distracted. A bull elk had appeared on the opposite slope, and she had focused on lining up the shot, on controlling her breathing, on everything her father had taught her. For 30 seconds, maybe 45, she had forgotten that her little brother was behind her on unstable terrain. She heard the scream before she heard the rocks. By the time she turned around, Marcus was gone, tumbled over an edge that had looked solid, but was not. The rescue team found his body 4 hours later, 200 feet below the trail. Alara wiped her eyes and returned to her mother's letter. I do not tell you this to cause you pain, sweetheart. I tell you because I need you to understand something. Marcus did not die because you were not watching. He died because the mountain does not care about our plans. You have carried that guilt for 8 years, and it has driven you to prove yourself in ways that would have amazed your brother and your father both. But you do not owe the world your suffering. You only owe yourself the chance to become who you were meant to be. Whatever happens at that school, whatever choice you have to make, know that Marcus believed in you. Your father believed in you, and I believe in you, not because of what you might accomplish, but because of who you already are. Come home safe. That is all I ask. Love, Mom. Alara folded the letter carefully and placed it in her wall locker. Then she sat in the silence of her empty quarters and let herself feel, for the first time in years, the full weight of what she had been carrying. A knock at the door interrupted her solitude. She opened it to find Tommy Ewan standing in the hallway, his face uncertain. I know we are not supposed to be here, he said, but I heard about the record attempt. Is it true? Are you really going to try it? Word travels fast. Derek told me. He paused. He also told me to tell you that if you do it, he will stand witness. Make sure they cannot pretend it did not happen. Something warm moved through her chest. Derek Odom, who had laughed at her on the first day. Derek Odom, who had resented her presence. Standing up for her now. Why would he do that? Tommy shrugged. Maybe because you help him when you did not have to. Maybe because he finally understands what kind of person you are. He hesitated. I will stand witness too. Whatever you need. Alara looked at the young Marine in her doorway, at the earnest determination in his face, and thought about all the people who had told her she did not belong. All the obstacles placed in her path. All the whispers and sabotage and systemic resistance. Then she thought about Catherine Reyes, fighting with one arm to save a man who would betray her. About her father, teaching her that excellence was the only answer to doubt. About Marcus, writing a letter about how he wanted to be brave like his sister. The evaluation starts at 0600, she said. The standard course runs until approximately 1300. The optional distance challenge opens immediately after. Tommy nodded. We will be there. She watched him disappear down the hallway, then closed the door and returned to her equipment. Tomorrow she would either break a record or break her career. There was no middle ground left. No safe path forward. But for the first time since arriving at Quantico, Alara Vance was not afraid. She was ready. 0530. The sky was still dark when Alara arrived at Range 4, but she was not the first one there. A figure stood near the firing line, barely visible in the pre-dawn gray. As she approached, she recognized the broad shoulders and permanent scowl of Gunnery Sergeant Crenshaw. He did not turn around when she stopped beside him. I know what you are planning, he said. His voice was quieter than she had ever heard it. The optional distance challenge. You think you're going to make some kind of statement? Alara said nothing. It will not matter. Even if you hit it, even if you break the record, they will find a way to dismiss it. Equipment malfunction. Favorable condition. Lucky shot. You cannot win, Corporal. The game is rigged. Then why are you here, trying to talk me out of it? Crenshaw finally turned to face her. In the dim light, she could see something in his expression that she had not expected. Not anger, not contempt, something that looked almost like fear. Because I have seen what happens to women who think they can change things, he said. They get ground up by the machine. They get their records rewritten and their service erased. They end up bitter and broken and wondering why they ever thought they could make a difference. Like Sergeant Reyes? The name hit him like a physical blow. She watched his jaw tighten, watched his hands clench at his sides. You do not know anything about Catherine Reyes. I know she saved your life. I know you could not accept it. I know you destroyed her career because your pride mattered more than the truth. For a long moment, Crenshaw did not respond. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. She should have let me die. It would have been simpler. Then he walked away, disappearing into the darkness before Alara could respond. She stood alone on the range, processing what had just happened. Crenshaw had come to warn her, or to intimidate her, or maybe to confess something he had never admitted to anyone else. It did not matter. Nothing he said changed what she had to do. The other candidates began arriving at 05:45. Tommy and Derek found positions near the observation area, their presence a silent promise. Staff Sergeant Rojas was among the instructor cadre, his face carefully neutral. Captain Westbrook stood apart from the others, watching without speaking. The standard qualification course began at 0600 sharp. Alara moved through the stages with mechanical precision. 200 meters, center hits. 300 meters, center hits. 400, 500, 600. Her scores were clean, her technique flawless. By the time she reached the final standard stage at 800 meters, she had posted one of the highest qualification scores in the course's history. But none of that mattered to Crenshaw. She could see him conferring with the other instructors, could see the notes being made on clipboards, could see the framework of her failure being constructed in real time. Enhanced scrutiny, subjective evaluations, the probation that made any minor discrepancy grounds for dismissal. At 12:45, the standard course concluded. The candidates gathered for a brief rest period before scores would be announced. Alara sat apart from the others, her rifle across her knees, her eyes fixed on the distant tree line. 1,000 meters. That was the distance she needed. Maybe more. A shot that no candidate had ever made during training. A shot that would require perfect calculation, perfect execution, and perfect conditions. She thought about her grandfather standing beside her in the Wyoming wind when she was just a girl. Every shot is a conversation, he used to say. You speak with your breathing. The rifle answers, and the wind is always listening. The wind today was variable. Southwest at ground level, shifting to west at elevation. Maybe 8 miles per hour, gusting to 12. She would have to read the mirage, calculate the drift, and trust her instincts in the moment between exhale and trigger brake. Corporal Vance. She looked up. Captain Westbrook stood before her. The optional distance challenge is available. Do you wish to attempt it? Alara rose to her feet. Yes, ma'am. You understand that failure at this stage will negatively impact your overall evaluation score. Given your current probationary status, a failed attempt could result in dismissal from the course. I understand. Westbrook held her gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded and turned to address the assembled candidates and instructors. Corporal Vance has elected to attempt the optional distance challenge. All personnel will observe. A murmur ran through the crowd. Alara walked to the firing line, feeling the weight of every eye on her back. She set up her position with deliberate care, checking the bipod, confirming her scope settings, settling into the prone position that felt as natural as breathing. The target was a steel silhouette at 1,000 meters. Beyond it, at ranges that extended past the official challenge distance, additional targets waited. 1,100 meters, 1,200, 1,300. She would start with the 1,000-meter target, but she would not stop there. Crenshaw appeared at the edge of her peripheral vision. He was holding a clipboard, his pen poised to record her failure. Behind him, the other instructors had gathered. This was the moment they had been waiting for. The moment the troublesome female candidate would overreach and destroy herself. "Let the girl try," Crenshaw said, his voice carrying across the range. The smirk on his face was exactly as she had imagined it would be. "Let her show us what she thinks she can do." Alara pressed her cheek to the stock and felt the world narrow down to her breath and the target and the space between them. The wind was speaking. The rifle was ready, and she was about to answer everyone who had ever told her she did not belong. One shot, one moment, everything on the line. She began to exhale. The world went quiet. Alara felt her heartbeat slow, felt the familiar stillness settle into her bones. This was the place her grandfather had taught her to find. The space between moments where nothing existed except the shot. 1,000 meters. The steel silhouette was barely visible to the naked eye, a dark shape against the tan backdrop of the impact berm. Through her scope, it filled the center of her reticle. She read the mirage rising from the ground, watched the heat shimmer bend and dance, calculated the wind drift in her head. Hold 2 minutes right. Elevation plus 14 clicks for the distance. Account for the crosswind at 600 meters that would push the bullet left before the upper current corrected it back. She had done these calculations 1,000 times before. In Wyoming, in training, in the quiet hours of the night when she visualized shots she might never take. But she had never done them with her entire future hanging on a single trigger pull. The breath left her lungs in a slow stream. At the bottom of the exhale, in a natural pause between breathing out and breathing in, her finger tightened. The rifle spoke. The recoil pressed in her shoulder, familiar as a handshake. She worked the bolt without lifting her head, chambering a fresh round, already preparing for the next shot. But first she had to know. The sound reached them 2.8 seconds later. A distant clang of lead striking steel. "Impact," the range safety officer called. "Center mass." Alara allowed herself one breath of relief. Then she shifted her aim to the next target. 1,100 meters. The wind had picked up slightly, gusting from the southwest. She adjusted her hold, read the new mirage pattern, and fired. Impact. Center mass. 1,200 meters. Now she was in territory that most shooters never reached. The bullet would be in flight for nearly 2 seconds, subject to every vagrant current and thermal pocket between here and there. She made her calculations, trusted her instincts, and sent the round downrange. Impact. 2 inches left of center. A murmur ran through the observers. Alara heard it, but did not acknowledge it. She was already looking at the final target, the one that mattered. 1,300 meters. Nearly 8/10 of a mile. A distance that seemed absurd for a standard sniper rifle. A distance that required everything she had learned in 24 years of shooting to even attempt. This was the shot that would break the record. 987 meters had stood for 37 years. She was about to exceed it by more than 300 meters. The wind shifted. She watched the mirage change pattern, watched the flags at the 500-meter line flutter and settle, watched a hawk riding thermals in the distance change direction. All of it was information. All of it was telling her something. Hold 4 minutes right. Elevation plus 22 clicks. Trust the rifle. Trust yourself. She exhaled. The trigger broke clean. For 2.7 seconds, nothing happened. The bullet was traveling, invisible, cutting through air currents and temperature gradients and the sheer improbability of hitting anything at that distance. Alara kept her eye to the scope, kept her body perfectly still, kept her breathing suspended in that eternal moment between action and consequence. Then the steel sang. Impact, the range safety officer said, and his voice cracked slightly on the word. 1,300 meters. Impact. The silence that followed was absolute. Alara lifted her head from the scope and looked at the observers. Tommy had his hands over his mouth. Derek was staring at her like he had never seen her before. Staff Sergeant Rojas was nodding slowly, something like pride in his eyes. Captain Westbrook stepped forward. Her voice carried across the range with parade ground clarity. Let the record show that Corporal Alara Vance has successfully engaged targets at 1,000, 1,100, 1,200, and 1,300 meters during the optional distance challenge. Her final shot exceeds the previous base record by 313 meters. She turned to face the instructor cadre. I trust there are no questions about the validity of these results. Multiple witnesses. Standard equipment. Control conditions. Crenshaw said nothing. His clipboard hung at his side, the pen unused. The smirk that had twisted his features minutes ago was gone, replaced by something hollow and defeated. Alara rose from her position, her legs steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. She had done it. She had made the shot that could not be denied, could not be explained away, could not be buried under enhanced scrutiny and biased evaluations. But as she stood there, accepting the stunned congratulations of her fellow candidates, she saw Crenshaw moving. He was walking toward the command post, his phone pressed to his ear, his free hand gesturing sharply. Whatever he was planning, it was not over yet. Tommy appeared at her elbow. That was incredible. I have never seen anything like that. No one has ever seen anything like that. What is Crenshaw doing? I do not know. But Derek went to follow him. Said he would find out. Alara watched the gunnery sergeant disappear into the building, and the triumph she had felt moments ago began to curdle into something else. She had beaten the record. She had proven herself beyond any reasonable doubt. But reasonable doubt had never been the standard Crenshaw applied to her. She had won the battle. The war was not over yet, and somewhere in that building, her enemy was already planning his next move. Derek found her 30 minutes later behind the classroom building. I know what he is doing, he said, slightly out of breath from running. He called someone at training command, a colonel he knows from his last deployment. He is trying to get the whole distance challenge invalidated. On what grounds? Derek's jaw tightened. He is claiming your rifle was modified, non-standard equipment. Says you must have swapped out components to make those shots possible. Alara felt the familiar cold settle into her chest. My rifle has been in the armory under lock and key. The same armory that only instructors can access. I know. I told Staff Sergeant Rojas exactly that. He is pulling the armory logs right now. Every sign in, every sign out, every time that cage was open for the last 2 weeks. The sabotage, the loosened scope mount, the adjusted elevation turret. If Crenshaw had been the one tampering with her equipment, the logs would show it. The very evidence of his conspiracy could become his undoing. There is more, Derek continued. That colonel he called? Turns out he is not a fan of Crenshaw. Some history between them that Rojas knew about. The colonel told Crenshaw to pound sand and hung up on him. Despite everything, Alara felt a flicker of grim satisfaction. Crenshaw's network was not as reliable as he thought. Why are you helping me? The question had been building for days. You hated me when I got here. You laughed at me on the first day. Derek looked away, his cocky Texas confidence faltering. I was wrong. He paused, struggling with words that did not come naturally. My old man always said women had no business in combat, so they would get people killed. I believed him because he was my father and because it was easier than thinking for myself. What changed? You did. Derek met her eyes. When you helped me with the wind reading, I want to hate you for it. Wanted to believe you were just showing off, proving you were better than me. But that was not what you were doing. You were just being a good teammate. And I have been too stupid and too proud to see it. Tommy appeared around the corner before Alara could respond. Captain Westbrook is looking for you. She says to come to the headquarters building immediately. They walked together across the base, the three of them, a small unit forged in the fire of the past 2 weeks. When they reached the headquarters building, Staff Sergeant Rojas was waiting outside. The armory logs, Alara said. What do they show? Rojas held up a folder. Gunnery Sergeant Crenshaw accessed your weapon locker 4 times in the last 10 days. Each access was logged between 0200 and 0400 when no other personnel were present. That is evidence of tampering. It is evidence of access. Combined with the anomalies you documented and the testimony of other candidates who witnessed the harassment, it paints a very clear picture. Rojas Post. Captain Westbrook has already forwarded everything to the Inspector General. Alara absorbed this. And Crenshaw? Inside, trying to talk his way out of it. But there is someone else in there too. Someone who flew in an hour ago when word of your record spread. Who? Rojas almost smiled. You will see. The conference room was the same one where she had faced the disciplinary board just days ago. But the atmosphere now was entirely different. Captain Westbrook stood near the window. The major and lieutenant colonel from before occupied their same seats, but their expressions had shifted from neutral judgment to something that looked like barely contained amazement. And in the center of the room, standing face to face with Gunnery Sergeant Crenshaw, was a man in his 60s with silver hair and the bearing of someone who had spent a lifetime in uniform. His chest bore ribbons that Alara recognized from her father's service photos. Distinguished Service Cross, Bronze Star with Valor Device, Purple Heart, Master Sergeant Frank Dillon, retired. The man whose record she had just shattered. He turned when she entered, and his weathered face broke into a grin. So you are the one, he said. His voice was deep and warm. 1,300 meters with a standard M40. I had to see you for myself. Alara snapped to attention. Master Sergeant. At ease, Corporal. I have not been active duty in 15 years. He stepped closer, studying her with eyes that had seen more through a rifle scope than most people saw in a lifetime. David Vance's daughter. I knew your father. Good man. Better spotter. You knew him? We served together in the Gulf. He saved my life twice. Never got the recognition he deserved. Dillon glanced at Crenshaw, and his expression hardened. Seems like that is a pattern around here. Master Sergeant, Crenshaw began, if you would just listen to the full context of the situation. I have heard enough context. Dillon's voice was quiet, but carried the weight of decades of authority. I have heard about the sabotage, the harassment, the conspiracy to wash out a qualified candidate because you could not handle being wrong about what women can do. He took a step toward Crenshaw. I held that record for 37 years, and I am proud that it fell to someone like her. Someone who had to fight twice as hard just to get the chance to shoot. Crenshaw's face had gone pale. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Captain Westbrook cleared her throat. Gunnery Sergeant Crenshaw, you are relieved of your duties pending a formal investigation. You will surrender your credentials and report to your quarters until further notice. The room watched as Crenshaw stood frozen, the full weight of his defeat settling over him. Then, slowly, he removed his instructor badge and set on the table. He turned to leave, but stopped at the door. His eyes found Alara one last time. You think you have won, he said quietly, but you have no idea what you have started. Then he was gone, and the air in the room seemed to lighten. Master Sergeant Dillon extended his hand. Congratulations, Corporal Vance. That record is yours now. Wear it well. Alara shook his hand, feeling the calluses of a lifetime of shooting against her palm. Thank you, Master Sergeant. He nodded once. Your father would be proud. Do not let anyone ever tell you otherwise. The evening after Crenshaw's removal, Alara found herself alone in the memorial garden where Captain Westbrook had first told her the truth. The bronze plaque with its list of fallen snipers gleamed in the fading light, and she traced the names with her fingers, wondering how many of them had faced their own battles before they ever saw combat. Footsteps approached on the gravel path. She turned to find Captain Westbrook walking toward her, but the captain was not alone. Beside her was a woman Alara had never seen before. Late 30s, dark hair streaked with gray, her left arm hanging at a slightly unnatural angle. A scar ran along her jawline, pale against brown skin. Corporal Vance, Captain Westbrook said, I would like you to meet someone. The woman stepped forward, and Alara saw the recognition in her eyes. The same recognition she had seen in Rojas when he first realized whose daughter she was. Catherine Reyes, the woman said, I drove up from North Carolina when I heard what happened. Alara felt her breath catch. Sergeant Reyes, I have heard about you. I imagine you have. Catherine's voice was steady, but there was emotion beneath it. I have heard about you, too. 1,300 meters. That is one hell of a shot. I had good teachers. Catherine nodded slowly, her eyes moving to the memorial plaque. I wanted to come sooner. Wanted to warn you about Crenshaw, about what he was capable of. But Captain Westbrook thought it might compromise the investigation if we made contact. She was right, Alara said. If Crenshaw had found out you were involved, He would have used it against me. He would have used anything against you. That is who he is. Catherine paused, something shifting in her expression. I spent 6 years being angry. Angry at him, angry at the system, angry at myself for not fighting harder. But watching what you did today, seeing him finally face consequences for what he is, I realized something. What? The anger was never going to fix anything. Only this could. Catherine gestured at Alara, at the base around them, at everything the day had represented. Someone standing up and being so undeniably excellent that the lies could not survive. Alara thought about her grandfather's words. The best response to doubt is not argument, but excellence. She had carried that belief through every obstacle, every sabotage attempt, every moment of despair. And somehow, impossibly, it had been enough. What will you do now? She asked. Catherine exchanged a glance with Captain Westbrook. Actually, that is part of why I am here. The investigation into Crenshaw is going to expand. Other women he harassed over the years are coming forward. The Marine Corps is going to need people who understand what happened and why. They offered you a position, consultant to the Inspector General's office, helping review training programs for bias and misconduct. Catherine smiled, and it transformed her face. Turns out getting forced out of the Corps was not the end of my story. It was just an intermission. Captain Westbrook stepped forward. The graduation ceremony is tomorrow at 0900. The Commandant himself is flying in to present the awards. Your record has attracted attention at the highest levels. Alara absorbed this. The Commandant of the Marine Corps, at a Scout Sniper School graduation. For her, there is going to be media. Westbrook continued. Interviews. Attention. The kind of spotlight that can be uncomfortable. I wanted to make sure you were prepared. I did not do this for attention. I know. That is exactly why you deserve it. The three women stood together in the memorial garden as the sun finished its descent. 3 generations of female Marines, each shaped by different battles, each carrying scars that did not show on the surface. But in this moment, there was no rank, no regulation, no protocol. There was only the understanding that passed between people who had fought the same war. Before I go, Catherine said, I want to give you something. She reached into her pocket and withdrew a small object. It was a challenge coin, worn smooth by years of handling. The emblem showed crossed rifles over globe and anchor. This was my father's, Catherine continued. He was a sniper in Vietnam. Carried it through 3 tours. When I made it through sniper school, he gave it to me. Said it would remind me that excellence runs in families. I cannot accept this. You can, because I finally understand what he meant. Catherine pressed the coin into Alara's palm. Excellence is not about bloodlines. It is about the people who refuse to quit, who carry the standard forward no matter what it costs. Your father had it. You have it. And someday, you will pass it to someone else who needs to remember that they are not alone. Alara closed her fingers around the coin, feeling its weight, its history, its meaning. Thank you, she said, for everything. Catherine nodded once. Then she turned and walked away into the gathering darkness, leaving Alara with Captain Westbrook and the memorial that held the names of those who had gone before. Tomorrow, Westbrook said quietly, 0900, dress blues. The whole world is going to be watching. Alara looked at the coin in her hand, then at the stars beginning to appear overhead. Let them watch, she said. The morning of graduation dawned clear and bright. The Virginia sky, a perfect blue that seemed to stretch forever. Alara stood before the mirror in her quarters, adjusting the collar of her dress blue uniform, making sure every ribbon and device was in its proper place. The face that looked back at her was the same one that had arrived at Quantico 3 weeks ago, but something behind the eyes had changed. She was not the same person who had stepped off that bus. She never would be again. The parade ground was already filling when she arrived. Rows of white chairs faced a wooden stage where the graduation would take place. Family members and dignitaries occupied the front sections, their conversations creating a low hum of anticipation. Camera crews from 3 different networks had set up positions along the perimeter, their equipment gleaming in the morning sun. Tommy found her near the candidates' assembly area. His dress blues were immaculate, his face split by a grin he could not contain. "Can you believe this?" he said. "3 weeks ago, I could barely hit a target at 500 meters. Now I am graduating from Scout Sniper School. You did the work. You earned it. I had help." He met her eyes. "I had someone who believed I could do it before I believed it myself." Derek appeared beside them, his Texas swagger tempered by something that looked almost like humility. "Quite a crowd out there. Word is the commandant has not attended a sniper graduation in 11 years. Then I guess we better not disappoint him." The ceremony began at 0900 sharp. The candidates marched to their positions with parade ground precision, each step synchronized, each movement deliberate. Alara took her place in the front row, acutely aware of the cameras tracking her every move. The commandant of Marine Corps was a 4-star general named William Chun, a compact man with silver hair and the quiet authority of someone who had commanded at every level. He spoke about tradition and excellence, about the legacy of the Scout sniper community and the standards that set it apart. But when he turned to the specific accomplishments of this graduating class, his tone shifted. "This course produced something extraordinary," General Chun said. "A record that had stood for 37 years was not merely broken. It was shattered. And the Marine who accomplished this feat did so while facing obstacles that would have defeated most of us." He paused, letting the words settle over the crowd. Corporal Lara Vance did not just prove that she belonged in this program. She proved that excellence has no gender, no background, no predetermined limits. She proved that when we judge people by their abilities rather than our assumptions, we discover capabilities we never imagined. Alara felt the weight of every eye on her, felt the cameras zooming in, felt the magnitude of the moment pressing against her chest. But she also felt something else: peace, the quiet certainty that she had done everything she set out to do. General Chun called the graduates forward one by one to receive their diplomas and their Scout Sniper insignia. When Alara's name was called, she marched to the stage with the same steady cadence she had used to approach every challenge in her life. The commandant pinned the insignia to her chest himself. Then he leaned close and spoke words that only she could hear. "Your father served under me in Somalia. He was the finest spotter I ever worked with. I see him in you." Alara swallowed hard. "Thank you, sir." He stepped back and rendered a salute that she returned with precision. The crowd erupted in applause, and she saw her mother in the front row, tears streaming down her face, clapping harder than anyone. After the ceremony, the families mingled with the graduates on the parade ground. Alara's mother embraced her so tightly she could barely breathe. "Marcus would have loved this," her mother whispered. "He would have been so proud." "I know, Mom. I felt him with me the whole time." Staff Sergeant Rojas approached as her mother stepped back. He was out of uniform today, wearing civilian clothes that made him look younger somehow. "I spoke with your father the day before he died," Rojas said quietly. "He told me about you. Said you were going to be something special. Asked me to keep an eye out, just in case our paths ever crossed." Alara felt tears threatening. "You honored that promise. He honored it by raising you. I just helped where I could." Master Sergeant Dillon appeared with Catherine Reyes at his side. The old sniper was beaming. "I brought something for you," he said. He held out a small wooden case. Inside, nestled in velvet, was his original marksmanship medal from 1987, the one he had earned setting the record she had broken. "I cannot take this," Alara protested. "You already have everything it represents. Consider it a welcome to the club." Dillon closed her fingers around the case. "There are not many of us, the ones who make shots that change history. But we look out for each other. Remember that." Captain Westbrook was the last to approach. She handed Alara an envelope. "Your orders. You have been assigned to 1st Reconnaissance Battalion as their newest Scout Sniper. They specifically requested you." Alara opened the envelope and scanned the documents inside. "Camp Pendleton, California. A new base. A new challenge. A new chapter. One more thing," Westbrook said. "The investigation into Crenshaw has expanded. 7 other women have come forward with similar stories. His career is over, and the Corps is implementing new oversight protocols for all training commands. What you did here did not just change your life. It changed the institution. Alara looked around the parade ground at the people who had become her family over 3 impossible weeks. Tommy, who had found his confidence. Derek, who had found his conscience. Rojas, who had kept a promise to a dead friend. Catherine, who had finally found justice. Her mother, who had never stopped believing. She thought about her grandfather in the Wyoming wind. About her father, gone too soon but never forgotten. About Marcus, forever 12 years old, writing about how he wanted to be brave like his sister. She had honored all of them, and now it was time to write the next chapter. If this story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us about your favorite moment, or about someone in your life who showed the world what they were capable of when no one believed in them. We would love to hear your story. Alara Vance tucked the wooden case under her arm and walked toward her mother. The sun was warm on her face. The future stretched out before her, limitless and bright. She had come to Quantico to prove she belonged. She was leaving as a legend,